Welcome to The Third Chair, a show about real people, real stories, real life. And here are your hosts for The Third Chair, Peter Grigg and Doug Bazeski.
Hey, everybody. You know, Doug, we have had a lot of guests that are authors.
Yes, we have.
And tonight's guest is no different. He's already published 2 books.
And I read one, which is kind of unusual.
Well, yeah, I read it as well. It was pretty good, short. I was glad that it was only like 150 pages. And he talks about overcoming some personal tragedies that I did like, as well as a remarkable bicycle ride across the country that served as an inspiration for spiritual musings about life while he rode, which I thought was kind of cool. We'll find more about that tonight. So let's talk about our guest.
To talk to him.
Yeah, we're going to let him talk. Yeah, so he's an author, a cycling enthusiast, a local optometrist, that's right here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and a survivor of a horrible fire, the Black Forest Fire of 2013. Please welcome a good friend of mine, Dr. John Rabins. Well, welcome to The Third Chair and our special guest, John Rabins. Dr. John Rabins, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Oh, man, we are so excited to have you. You know, we've been friends now for a while, 20 years?
Since 2004.
2004. You are my optometrist. You take care of my eye care. We've gone on mission trips all over the world. And you've also led an amazing life that we're really excited to talk about. You've had some time as a military officer talking to dignitaries around the world, and a PhD in all sorts of cool laser things that try to talk as a layman on that subject. And more recently, also had the very difficult time of surviving the Black Forest Fire. Now, that was 2013,
correct,
where you lost your house. Mm-hmm. And since that time and that experience prompted you to publish your first book. And that's what I'd like to start to talk about tonight. There it is.
Defined by Fire. It's a good book. I read it.
Yeah.
I actually read it.
I read it too. It was very good. But I mainly read it because you said you'd give me $1 if I read it, so I did read it.
I stole you the $1.
You stole me the $1.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Defined by Fire. Why did you write this book?
Well, I felt prompted by the Lord to write the book.
Okay.
And I really thought it was for me.
All right.
Because he had provided me really 7 definitional truths that are true about me as a Christian man, but I think other people might find these definitional truths to be true about them as well, no matter what their spiritual maturity is.
Sure, and we're going to go into all those spiritual truths and ideas that you wrote about in the next section or so. And it took 7 years to write, or longer?
7 years to write from the fire.
From the fire to
yeah.
That'd make it 2000, and then you had it published.
It was published in 2000, early 2000. Right.
It's published
2000. Wait a minute. 2020.
2020. Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, you should never listen to the co-host.
I should not.
I should
not. Don't believe anything Peter tells you.
And
2020.
And
that's a good year for an optometrist, right? 2020.
2020 vision. That's nice. You should work that into a sequel.
In 2020 years, 40-40?
40-40?
Or 1,000?
Yeah, that would be good.
10 years, 30-30?
So is it hard to write a book? I mean, coming up with the content which you felt was somewhat inspired and divine, but what about the day-to-day typing away and
That's
editing?
hard. That's hard to do. And if you talk to an established or accomplished writer, Jerry Jenkins is a good one. He's got a writers club that I was a part of for a while. And
Yeah.
he says, you just got to work at it and dedicate time to it every day. You can't wait until you feel inspired to write.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had to sit down each day and do some writing. And he sent an email today where he said, if you do that, you may realize that you've written 4 pages of junk. But then you realize that at least you've written something, and there may be something good that comes out of that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for any artist and writer.
But I think we should start with what happened on that day.
Well, what happened on that day?
Well, what happened? That's a good question, Peter.
What happened on that
What
day?
happened on that day, June 11, 2013? A lot happened that day. My father was in a hospital in California. He had a recalcitrant infection in his leg that wasn't healing up, but he was in rehab, and he was supposed to come home to his house in Los Angeles. That would have been Wednesday. And I had made arrangements to fly to California to help him in that transition. And on that fateful day, the 13th, which I think was a Tuesday, I made reservations to fly out there on the Monday before the fire, the day before the fire. And on that Tuesday, I received 2 just earth-shattering phone calls in the office. I had patients with me. And the first one was from my mother, who said that my father was failing. Okay. And she didn't know what to do. They'd been married 60 years. And so she was frightened, very, very frightened. And so we talked for a little bit, and then we hung up. And then I got another call from our housekeeper, who informed me that the Black Forest was on fire, and it might be threatening our house. Now, it's funny because the Waldo Canyon burned the year before.
Right.
There were 300 or 400 houses lost in that fire, and you would think that smart people would put together a list of things that you might be prepared to take out of the house should that happen to you. Well, Nancy and I didn't do that. And even then, when she called me, I'm thinking this isn't really going to mean anything. We're going to evacuate for a while. We'll come back to the house. That's what you think naturally. So that call came, and then I got another call from my cousin Steve. Actually, before that, I got a call from our caregiver, my dad's caregiver, named Linda, and she said, your dad is in a coma. He's dying. Would you like to speak with him? And I said, well, how can he hear me if he's in a coma? And you as a doctor probably know what she said to me is true, and that is the hearing is the last sense to go.
Sure.
And so here, John, I'm putting you to his ear. I want you to talk with him. Well, I had my technician next to me, and she was praying, I know that, and I spoke to my dad. I said, Dad, I don't know if you can hear me. I'd shared my faith in the Lord numerous times with my parents, and they knew about my life and the problems I have had in my life, and they said, I think that's good for you, John, but it's not good for us. There were a Jewish family who really did not practice Judaism. They just called themselves Jews in name only. And so I said to my dad, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, I want you to know how much I love you. I want you to know that there's someone who loves you more than I do, and his name is Jesus. And I think this is the last opportunity for you to invite him into your life. And my prayer right now, Dad, is that you would do that. Wow. That was the last set of words I spoke to my dad. I have hope that maybe he did.
Sure.
I don't know that. That's out of my control.
No, but it's good to have hope. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Why not?
And then I got a call from my cousin a little bit later, Steve, and he said, I hate to tell you this, but your dad has died. Same day. And then, so my trip to California was no longer a trip to help my dad come home, but rather to bury him. And I was asked to speak at his funeral. And I likened him to a very generous father, which our Father in heaven is. But I didn't know about the status of the house until several days later, because I still hadn't been on the destroyed housing list. And I'm standing ready to go into his funeral service where I was going to speak, and Nancy called me on the phone. Nancy's my wife, as you know, And she said, I hate to tell you this, babe, but the house has been destroyed totally.
And it wasn't just the house, too. Didn't you also have, like, rental property and vehicles?
We had lots of vehicles. My son Michael was storing vehicles there at the house. They were burned. They just melted. He had aluminum trucks that just melted to the ground. It was amazing.
I remember before the fire, because I didn't know you at the time, but your house, because the car blowing up, was on the news constantly. I've probably seen it like 6 or 7 times.
Really?
At that time.
I couldn't stomach to see it that many times.
I
But
know,
I was in California, and my son Michael.
It was always on the TV.
Yeah, just for our fans, you can Google the Black Canyon fire and probably see John's house on fire.
I'm not encouraging anyone to do this, but if you
sobering though.
If you Google Black Forest garage fire, you would see this from a helicopter that was taking video of my property. But to answer your question, Peter, yes, we had another property on 11 acres. We were very fortunate to have that, and it had 9 buildings, I guess, on it, including a home and an auto mechanic shop, a gunsmith shop, a horse stable and barn, the corral, and some interesting one-room cabins, one of which was used by a holiness pastor in the late 1800s, who actually lived there on the property. And I read a book that he had written, and you would think when you read this book that there's no one who could have done all these things, but I'm beginning to believe that he really did. And he's buried on the property, I'm told. Wow. So when you lose that much all at once, you realize that, wow, it was like being, hit with a couple of boxing gloves right in the chin.
With a horseshoe inside.
There's nothing like losing everything you have, or having everything you could possibly want one day and then losing everything you have in a matter of minutes.
Family and things. So hold that thought for a minute, because it can be said that you can go through devastating times and not be changed in a positive way. You can just be angry and bitter and wounded, or you can let God work during these hard times and produce something good on the other side. Not saying that God created the fire or anything like that.
I don't believe he did.
Yeah, I don't think so. So when we come back after this break, we'll talk about some of these ideas and changes that were birthed in you through this process that you happen to write down into a book. When we come right back.
Coffee of the Kentucky-Arizona Walnut Association?
It's kava.
The national coffee of Kawasaki, Japan?
It's kava.
Hiya!
Is it the secret elixir of the surfers in Hawaii?
Or is it the secret island recipe of Kona, Koala, Kauai, or Cola?
It's kava. Kava is Polish for coffee. Here at Kava Coffee, we focus on serving a delicious, high-quality cup of coffee in a space where love, coffee, and people mix into the perfect blend.
We value our relationships with our customers and our roasters. Buy locally whenever possible and truly have the homemade touch. Our pastries, syrups, and even our almond milk are made in-house.
So come on in, relax, get some work done. Enjoy the Kava community, some encouraging words from the Kava Coffee Gang.
Kava Coffee.
Be awake.
Welcome back to the third chair with our special guest, Dr. John Rabins. When we went to the break, John had been telling us how he lost his father and most of his possessions in the Black Forest fire in June 2013. And John reminded me during the break that he was scheduled to go on a missions trip to do optometry in rural El Salvador, actually with my wife and some people from our church. Was that a hard trip for you? Or did you find doing the work more therapeutic and healing?
The latter. I remember distinctly Rhonda, your wife, calling me from Colorado Springs. She called me in California, and she said, I understand your loss, and I imagine that you will not be going with us. We were scheduled in August. The fire was in June, so 2 months later, she thought would be just not enough time. What I didn't say is that I went to California to help my dad's funeral, and Nancy stayed in Colorado Springs and was working on insurance things and all that kind of stuff. Before Rhonda called me, though, Nancy had said to me when I expressed some real frustration, and I really felt like, do I really want to continue optometry, which is a love for me. Mm-hmm. I have a beautiful practice. 30% of my practice is about this high and below, and I just love working with kids. I love working with all of my patients. But Nancy had said, why would you give up the one semblance of normalcy in our lives? Because that is something you love doing. Your patients love you. Why would you give that up? And I really thought about it, prayed about it, and I decided, you know what, that's right. So when Rhonda called me, I said, I've decided to go because I think it's going to be good for me. And it really was good for me. It's always good to give. And she said, well, in that case, I want you to preach at a service. Okay. Yes. Well, the service didn't happen because we were held up in customs and things like that. But I did get a chance to preach, if you will, at the dedication ceremony after the 3.5-day clinic. And what I had prepared was the backbone of this book. It was the 7 definitional truths that God had given me that he wanted to just pound into me in such a way that I would understand that I am not defined by so many things that other people define themselves with. I am defined by God alone. It's really hard to allow that to seep into your heart in such a way that it makes that big a difference. But writing this book, which I thought was for me, has really made a difference for me. And it turns out it's making a difference for others as well.
So part of the book, you came up with or were given or brought to your attention what you called the 7 PR words that sort of described the process that you and Nancy went through. And so Doug is going to ask you about those. And this is not a quiz.
I'd be hard pressed to remember them all, but I do have a keychain. You have to
have a 70% or above. Or
oh my gosh, I could probably name them all, but not in order. But this is the keychain that my friend Liz, who was a fellow officer with me in the Airforce, she had made for me, which I didn't even know because she called me on the phone too and expressed her condolences. But on this side of the keychain she made for me is Philippians 4:13, which says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then this is, I don't know if you can see this very well, but I'll send you pictures. But there are 7 PR words that I was sitting in my dad's study before the funeral, and the Lord, he doesn't usually speak to me in an audible tone, but I know when he's speaking to me oftentimes, and he wanted me to take out a piece of paper and a pen and write these words down. So I wrote down these words that all started with PR. Process, pray, prepare, provide, protect, prevail, and prosper. And he made it clear to me that these were the steps that Nancy and I were going to go through in our healing process. Right. And I have found this to be true. This has been true. Some of these are more prominent at different times in our journey, but it's been an incredible journey nevertheless.
And it kind of relates to when people have bad news, acceptance, you hear that. But
the stages of grief.
The stages of grief. But this one has things you can do to help yourself along those stages. Grief, because you were suffering from grief. I mean,
true, and I found that these happened in this order. We spent a lot of time processing. There's nothing, like I said earlier, like having everything you could want one day and having nothing the next. And I'm so grateful for a really dear friend of mine who actually irritated me when he said this at first. He says, "Hey, John," he says, "you know what? If you've got Jesus in your life, you don't even need anything. You don't even need air." And that's true. That's why Paul could confidently write in his writings in the New Testament, I'd rather die and be with Christ in heaven, but for your sake, I'm still here. A little consolation at the time, but I get it now. I get it.
So how long, like the whole 7 steps, how long do you think it took you to get through those 7 steps?
I'm still going through them.
Still going through them?
You go through them multiple times?
Well, it's...
Or is it sequential once?
It's not sequential. I mean, we went through it pretty sequentially, but now I'm finding that I may spend a little bit more time on one than the other.
Okay, just going back.
Yeah, it's just something that you revisit at times.
So process, you're getting bad news all around you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of those, besides that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, well,
as in Abraham Lincoln's wife.
Yes. And I tell people, honestly, I tell people that I wouldn't wish these kinds of tragedies on anyone.
Sure.
But based on what has gone on in my life since, I wouldn't trade places either. Because even though it's hard at times, I love what God is doing in my life right now. I am so grateful for his presence.
I like how your wife said, no, don't do that, because you need some normalcy to hold on to. I mean, that was part of the process that she had hey, wait a minute, I'm helping you. Her advice helped you through the process because you're kind of in shock.
It allowed me to make a really good decision and say yes to Rhonda's question. Even though she thought I wasn't going to go, I was going to go, and then she invited me to speak, and that doesn't take much for me to speak. I can speak about
just for the record, my wife doesn't take no as an answer very often.
I see.
Yeah. But she was willing that time because
she was.
You went through a lot. All at once.
So that's the 7 PR, and then Liz made some other keychains for me, so I keep them on all my keychains. I have several sets of keychains, and I've got them on all of them. And periodically, they're worn out, but I look at them and I think, wow, that's really right. That's right.
So how soon did you pray after you get all this news? I mean, was it before your wife had called? To tell you to.
We were praying in the exam room. When we got the phone calls. Jamie, my technician, was there by me. I just so appreciated her. She was praying for me as I talked with my dad and as I received the call from my cousin Steve. And I'll tell you something really interesting. I remember vaguely that the patient I had in the chair, right at the end, after the last call, my staff came in and escorted her out. Okay, because they knew that I wasn't able to continue on. After the first set of news, I said, "Oh no, I'm fine. I'll keep going." But then they escorted her out, and wouldn't you know it? Just last week, I had a woman in my chair, and she said, "You probably don't remember this, but I was that woman in your chair that they escorted out when you got that news."
Wow,
that just blew me away.
That does. That blows me away.
Yeah, I was so grateful to make that connection because I'd forgotten.
Wow.
So prepare. What do you mean by prepare?
Well, when you don't have a house and you don't have belongings, you got to do something.
You have work to do.
You need to prepare, and so we were fortunate to live in a home of a dear set of friends for a couple of months. But then we bought a little 400 square foot cabin that we put on the property that burned. It's one of those little eco cabins you see along the side of the highway sometimes.
Yeah.
And so we moved in there, and it's funny because some of my friends and patients says, well, where'd you put all your stuff? You moved from a 6,000 square foot home to a 400 square foot home. Where's all your stuff?
It's still there, but it's charcoal, right?
Charcoal.
It's burned up.
Yeah. So when you use the word prepare there, you're really talking about what are my plans now going forward,
right?
That kind of thing.
Did you have to prepare yourself like this is going to take a while? I mean, this is not going to be like an overnight thing.
There's a lot of unknowing. You just don't really know what to expect. But our church came around us. You guys came around us. My patients came around us. They helped sift through the stuff. We were told our next door neighbor ran the sifting operations. We had people from Schriever Air Force Base, so military, who came out and helped sift, and people brought us stuff, and asked us, is this something you want to keep? Frankly, there's not much worth keeping, We kept a couple of things, and a lot of stuff is still sitting there on the property, just burnt.
Let's hold that thought, because and we'll pick it right back up on the next one right when we come back. We'll get back to our guest in just a moment. But
do you have a story to tell?
Would you, yes you, like to be a guest on the third chair?
Send us an email and tell us about yourself and your story.
And please follow us on social media.
Now back to the episode.
Welcome back to the third chair with our special guest, John Rabins. When we left off, we were talking about the fateful day of June of 2013, as the Black Forest fire, began to encroach and come towards his property. And it was at that point your wife made a call, or you made a call. Who made the call?
I think she called me. I may be wrong about that, but she said, hey, I'm at first of all, she took my dog Obi from the vet to the house, and she was blocked by a police blockade, and she said, but I have animals in the house, and they said, sorry, you can't go there. She found a back way into the house, and she calls me from the driveway, and she says, okay, we never made a list, but what should I grab? And of course you panic and you're stressed, and I said, okay, let's think real quick here. Why don't you grab our work computer, our personal computer, we couldn't think of very much. We thought of several things to grab. And she managed to grab my Bible, which I've written in for 30 years, so I'm glad for that.
Right.
And we grabbed the animals, obviously. She found them all. Our one cat, Samantha, was nowhere to be found, and Nancy relates to me, and it's in the book also, that she said, I yelled in the house, I said, Samantha, you got 2 minutes to save your life. And so she showed up, she found her, and she brought her back. She put our snake, Shika, who we've had for a very long time, in a pillowcase, and took her out. And then she calls me from the driveway. This is Tuesday. Remember, I'm flying to California the next day. And she said, is there anything else I need? I need to get out of here. And I said, well, I'm traveling to my dad's funeral tomorrow. Could you grab my utility bag? My toothbrush and stuff. And she said, John, are you serious? You really want me to go in the house and grab your utility bag? I said, you know what? I had a moment.
The flames coming in.
I had a moment of sanity.
Could you get my toothbrush?
I said, no.
I got the toothbrush.
Get out of there is what I said. And she did. And so she did manage to bring one little load of clothing, out to the car, and then she left. And we honestly thought we were going to come back. Mm-hmm. But it's a heartbreaking moment when we ended up coming to the house eventually and seeing this. And it just causes your heart to stop, to see nothing but a few chimneys standing. Mm-hmm. Everything else gone. I will say this. If you got to lose all your stuff, a fire is better than a flood. And the reason, of course, for that is in a flood, you still see your stuff. You just can't use it.
Yeah,
a fire wipes it out.
Yeah, my parents were flooded twice. So,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fourth P-R on the list is provide. So what do you mean?
Well, that's really part of what I said regarding prepare. But provide for our family. We need a place to stay, which we were able to do, and provide food and clothing. We had to buy new clothing and everything. Very fortunate that we have a wonderful insurance company called USAA, and they really took care of us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. They did. There were people at some of the town meetings that we went to that were not so privileged. They had insurance companies that were not so good, or they didn't have insurance, and they were bitter. And I do talk in the book about miserable people wanting to be around miserable people, and I tried to distance myself as much as possible from that kind of attitude, because it's not healthy for me. I need to be around positive people. And it doesn't mean we don't minister to people like that, but we don't dwell there either, or we'll become just like them.
Is that part of what you mean by protect?
That is partly protect, yeah. Protect my family in a vulnerable state, which we were.
Right. And I mean, you don't want to get depressed again and again and again.
But it happens, though. It comes and it goes, and yeah.
Just in the normal flow, not somebody else putting the pressure on you.
Right.
And that brings us to prevail.
We've seen a lot of success, that came from this. I don't liken myself to Job at all in the Old Testament, all right? But people have likened me to Job. No, nothing like that. But
I think you're better looking.
Maybe. Yeah.
Have you seen pictures of Job?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah,
I think it was
he's got the boils,
I think it was in Newsweek last week.
That's right.
But anyway, no, I don't liken myself to Job, but I do understand what he went through. He lost everything. He lost his family. He lost his cattle. He lost all of his stuff. And yet God blessed him amazingly through that, and he ended up with way more than he had before. Now, you can't replace what you've lost.
Right.
Okay? Just like when you lose a pet, you'll never have another pet quite like that one. When people say to you, well, you'll get another dog. Yeah, I'll get another dog, but it'll never replace that dog. But you learn to love the new dog in a new way.
Yeah.
And as time goes by, like I just lost a dog a month ago. I mean, but you start to think of I'm starting to think of the fond memories of her, rather than the fact that it's just that she passed away, and it's sad.
You make new memories.
Right.
You do. And so, I don't resent anything that we've been through. In Romans, Paul writes, all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to His purpose. And I really believe that. I don't think God had anything to do with this other than to allow it to happen and allow Him to work in my life. He needed to get my attention somehow, and He did.
Well, I've had some friends that lost everything in fires, and it's still very devastating. A lot of pain, and you're talking about all these things so positive now, 7 years later. I'm sure it was hard at the time on some levels, and also too, you mentioned all the people that showed up to help in different ways. It's amazing how God, that people are the mouth and the hands of God helping someone when they're hurting.
Right. There were only 2 houses that were lost on our street, ours and one across the street, down the street a ways. It's a dead-end street. And we went over, I remember very clearly going over next door to talk to our neighbors to let them know we were all right, And Susan met us at her door, and she was pale as a ghost when she saw us. And we said, Susan, are you all right? And she said, I think I'm having the worst case of survivor guilt ever, And so we ended up consoling her. We said, Susan, we're fine. We are blessed. We are fine.
Well, survivor guilt's a real thing. That's seen in the military a lot. Somebody's killed and the other guy survives, and he just can't live with the fact, why was I spared?
Right.
Yeah. It's good that you recognize that someone, even if they didn't lose all their stuff, they could be really hurt by the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after you prevail, you're prospering. I mean, you still got your business?
My business is beautiful right now. We've since brought on another doctor who works 3 days a week. I'm there very busy 1 day a week. And then I'm also under contract with 3 different jail facilities in northern Colorado that I spend 4 days every month, 1 week a month, doing jail exams too. So I love where I am.
Good. It seems to me that I'm going to ask you now about your first truth, and I'm going to read it. Unless, Doug, you wanted to chime in. Did you have another thought on that?
I'm good.
You're good? You are good. And this first one, I think is...
and that reminds me of Joe Black last week. He had this song, we all good. We're all good.
We're all good, yes.
Yep.
The first one I thought was really powerful because it has to do with the whole idea of possessions and how it's so easy to have your possessions possess you, and your whole identity be wrapped up in what you own. And so I like the way how you worded it. I'm not defined by what I own. Rather, I'm defined by Him who owns me. Now, I think also, like Buddhism has a whole lot of kind of writing on that. A great deal of suffering in the world is from attachment to things. And so I see some sort of similar thoughts that when we don't look at possessions correctly, that can lead to trouble. So what was the main thing then when you sort of saw that truth that you took away from?
I like the way you put it, where your possessions possess you. That was very well said. I don't know that too many people would admit this, but you all know people who define themselves based on what they own, okay? I mean, somebody who's really proud of his sports car. There's nothing wrong with owning things. Please understand that. Nothing wrong with owning things. God lends us things for a time. You can't take it with you. We all say that.
Yeah. And
yet somehow we feel like we are going to take it with us. We
hard to get a yacht in a little casket.
I do know a guy. He's a good friend of mine. He's a patient of mine, and he has a Corvette, and he said he's going to be buried in his Corvette. Okay? Which I think
has he figured out where?
I have no idea, but he's serious about it. Anyway, how many people do you know that are attached, maybe overly attached, to a football team, okay, or a career, or a title, or a spouse? Okay, you can
watch it there, brother.
You can draw your definition from another person. All right, and while all of those things are very important and wonderful to have in our lives, okay, what I learned through this is that they are not what defines us. Okay, and I talk about a story of T-shirts, and I think it's time to take a break.
We're going to take a break.
I think it's time to take a break.
When we come back from our break,
we'll talk about T-shirts.
Yeah, folded T-shirts. Thousands of folded T-shirts.
Not thousands, Peter.
Yes,
I told you a million times
saw the
not
pictures.
to exaggerate.
I never exaggerate. Okay. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Grigg, a life and recovery coach with Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching. I've had the pleasure and privilege of helping people for over 25 years. I want to hear your story, support and encourage you while we partner together to help you reach your goals. I can help you. I am certain I can help you. I can be your guide, role model, resource person, and help you get results. What's my coaching frameworks? I'm an eclectic coach drawing from a variety of disciplines and frameworks with evidence-based proven methods. What would you like to work on? Some popular areas are goal setting and attainment, building and maintaining motivation, finding purpose, personal development, recovery from drug and alcohol addiction problems, health and wellness, life planning, athletic and creative artist performance enhancement, maybe something else. Just ask me. I would love to help you. You can find my services on Fiverr.com. Welcome back to the Third Chair with our special guest, Dr. John Rabins. We're talking about his book and some of his insights. Here's another one, John, that I just am really fascinated. Being a professional where your CV is always being looked at and compared, and how many research papers have you written, and what are your titles, and what are your degrees, and what all can you do? The whole idea of I'm not defined by what I've done. I'm defined what he's done. Now, you also, as a professional PhD, doctor of optometry, do you tell us about that? You had to experience this as you've gone along.
Well, I still struggle with that, and don't for a minute think that I've mastered any of these. I mean, it just points out my areas for improvement still. I'm better today than I was yesterday, but I still got a lot of growing to do. This whole life is full of growth, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I remember as a kid, I did so many things really well. I was a gymnast in high school. I ended up being recruited to the academy as a gymnast, and then I was asked to compete for a congressional nomination, which I was able to do to free up another recruiting slot. And I'm still friends with that coach today. We just went to lunch a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
He's in his 80s now. He's a great man. But I remember that I did academics well. I did music. I played piano. I did all these things. And somehow I got the idea, not because my parents ever vocalized this, but I got the idea that in order to be accepted and loved, I had to perform and perform well.
Not just perform well.
Perform well, right. That equated to love and acceptance. And it's been very hard to break away from that and to understand that God wants me, to perform, obviously, His will, but I'm not graded on that. Okay, I'm graded on my heart. Where is my devotion? And that's why I understand more today that I'm defined by not what I do, but what Jesus did on the cross. Okay, that covers everything. And all I have to do is believe that. And I write about Obi, my dog, coming. In fact, my dedication in the book is dedicated to Obi because he taught me better than any book or person could what God's unconditional love really looks like. And there's a picture of Obi in there that was painted by a very special patient of mine. She's an excellent artist. But I remember one day sitting in the cabin that we were in, early in the morning, sitting at my desk, and Obi came around the corner and he jumped up on me and he laid his head against my cheek. And he just sat there, as if to say, Dad, can I just spend time with you today? I'd really like to spend time with you. My favorite thing in the world is to have you throw the ball to me and have me retrieve it. But I don't even mind if we don't do that. Can I just spend time with you? And I think that's what God wants of us, His children. He wants us to jump in His lap and just say, Father, can I just spend time with you? Do I do that well? No. Am I trying to do it better? I find when I do that and spend time in the Word in the morning and in prayer and just say, I'm open to whatever you've got for me. I think that's when He shows up in a big way, and I see opportunities to share His love with others. I think, real quickly, that if I ever am tempted in the morning to pray, God, what can I do for you today? I think honestly now it disappoints Him when I put it that way, because I think He would say to me, what do you mean, what can you do for me? It's all about what I have done for you. Can you just accept what I've done for you and just walk in my love and my grace and be my kid today? Obi's my kid.
Yeah. Well, I hear what you're saying. Some would also say, though, we're admonished in Scripture, like, true religion is taking care of widows and orphans and that. So there are things to do as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know you're not saying that.
I am not saying not to do that, no.
So, and then a third one that, again, I find these just really deep. I'm not defined by my tragedy and dark places. Rather, I'm defined by Him who carries me through tragedy and is my light in dark places. And I do think something you said earlier, we all are tempted, and some people don't resist the temptation well, but they seem to be happy being miserable and making their life about their tragedy. It's not... And don't get me wrong, I'm not celebrating a tragedy, but it seems to be less about how about overcoming the tragedy and how has God helped me overcome the tragedy. They sort of just get stuck there and are happy in their pain. And so...
I get that.
Yeah, and so the second part of that, tell me about that a little bit more. You're defined by He who carries you through tragedy. And did you feel like God carried you through this tragedy? And was He the light during the dark times after the fire and your father's death?
Indeed He was. I get why. I'm tempted to fall into the same mindset. Woe is me. Everybody look at me. I suffered this much. Because it's fun to hear people who come around you and just pour their affection on you and their condolences on you and everything.
Yes, yeah.
And that builds you up a little bit, but to continually spend time in that kind of environment, I don't think is healthy. I think God has called me to continue being a light and to be around positive attitudes, positive people. When you look around you, especially today with this environment we live in, I think that many, well over 50, 60, 70% of people live with a sort of loser's mentality. A victim's mentality is a better word, okay? I'm a victim, so I have expectations or entitlements that I feel I deserve. There are very few that have victors' mentalities, and I think God is calling us to enjoy the victory that we've won in Him. It's really that simple. Do I do that well? No.
So much about people saying life is misery and all that, and it's like,
eat drink for tomorrow, die. Yeah.
There's still fun to have, no matter where you are.
Well, and everyone experiences pain. It's whether you move past it. I'm not saying that only the people stuck are the only ones that are suffering. We all suffer. We all will have loved ones that die. We will all have illness on this earth, but it's whether we can move past that and have joy, even if we're going through hard times. I like this one, number 4. You claim that your thinking is all screwed up. Stinking thinking. And you know that you've experienced stinking thinking by your experience, your personal experience.
True.
Do you ever find yourself stuck in stinking thinking?
All the time.
Give me an example of some of your favorite stinking thinking, and then I'll tell you mine.
You don't need to tell me yours, and I don't need to tell you mine. I can just tell you the mistakes that I make are typically because of my own thinking, all right? And it runs deeper than that, okay? It's not just that I'm doing the thinking. I need to cooperate with God and what He's doing in my life, but I really believe that, as a Christian man, that's the reason that I'm admonished to read the Scriptures and understand what He has already done in my life. If you read Ephesians chapter 1, you'll be amazed at how much of it, if not all of it, is written in the past tense. Paul writes there, I have been raised to heavenly realms. I have done this. This has happened to me already. It's an amazing thing to look at. And so it occurred to me as I was writing this book that I think the essence of the Christian walk is not to become a Christian. We already became a Christian on Salvation Day, and God did way more for us on Salvation Day than we even realize. And that's why He wants us reading His book, His manual for life, as I like to call it, and start to walk in what is already true about us. All right? When I strive to be something that I already am, there's something wrong with that. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, God has already given me all this stuff, and He's already called this true in my life. So why am I having a hard time believing that?
Well, in this chapter, you really talked about sort of 2 different angles, the spiritual angle, but also the sort of the cognitive behavioral psychology angle. And the cognitive behavioral psychology angle is like, we do all these things to really screw up how we think about things. Like, one is something called all or nothing thinking. We get into that when, say a hard thing happens in our life, and we come to the conclusion that everything about our life sucks. But it's really not the case. It's like, well, if I make a list, I find that there's 5 really good things going on and 1 bad thing. But we get into this really incorrect thinking that everything's wrong, and then we're depressed and whiny and angry and all those things. And then also the whole idea of having our mind sort of renewed by the Scripture and choosing to believe how it points out we should be thinking about life.
Well, I'm learning to memorize Scripture, and one of the ones I'm working on right now is Philippians 4. be anxious for nothing, but in
It's good.
everything by prayer and supplication make your requests known to God. And then later on, before you get to verse 9, it talks about what you should think about, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's lovely. Those are the things. And then the God of peace will be with you.
Sure.
And so,
That's a good place for us to take a break. We'll be right back. We sure hope you're enjoying this episode of The Third Chair.
Would you like to be a sponsor for the third chair?
We would love to have you join us to keep the show going and also help your business. Send us an email about your product or company and let's talk.
And follow us on social media.
Now back to The Third Chair.
yes.
Hi, and welcome back to The Third Chair with our special guest, Dr. John Rabins. John, we missed something that we thought the audience might be interested in. At least I find it fascinating. We talked about the idea of possessions, and apparently you collected like a gazillion folded t-shirts. Can you tell us about this?
Not quite that many, Peter.
Not that many?
No, not quite that many. But I had hundreds and hundreds of new t-shirts. This goes to a form, I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, a form of mental illness that I think I possess. I like new things. Okay? Everybody likes new things, but I like them to an unhealthy extreme. I don't want to use a new thing, because if I use a new thing, then it's not new anymore, not valuable to me. That's how I used to think. And so I collected t-shirts, and I had hundreds and hundreds of animal prints and Hard Rock Cafe shirts. I had a
that you didn't wear.
I didn't wear, but I had a chance to travel all over the world. I brought shirts back from everywhere, and being a former military guy and being anal in my attitude, I would fold them neatly in little squares, and I'd put them in drawers, and I'd put them on shelves, and periodically I would look at them, and I would say,
that was it.
I would say, wow, I
Still
forgot
new.
I had that shirt. I'm going to wear that shirt.
Someday.
Well, someday. The fact of the matter is, I never wore them, and they were all lost in a fire. I lost hundreds of shirts in a fire. And that's one of those times where I really felt God was speaking to me. He says, John, this is a great lesson for you. If I gift you, whether it be with a tangible gift like a t-shirt or a spiritual gift, guess what? You're to use it. Okay, otherwise you risk losing it, or I may give it to somebody else instead. So I've gotten a whole bunch of t-shirts since the fire, and
You worn them?
I do.
Oh,
I
good.
force myself to wear them. It's hard to change
Is it
habits.
stressful?
It is a little bit stressful. I don't have too many new ones left. I wear them, and they're sort of growing on me, which means I'm growing in this area.
man.
I think we're to use stuff.
Oh, that is so good. A good reminder, I guess, also of not focusing on collecting too much stuff.
easy
But it's
to
okay
fall
to
into.
have 10 t-shirts, to go. I know you spin and you ride your bike and you work out, so you need some workout clothes. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah,
Right,
that's all right.
right. I've got more than that.
Yeah.
I do try to wear 'em.
Now you mentioned something in passing that some of our viewers may have missed, but it was like on my radar in a major way, and that was, you mentioned that Nancy went in and saved Sheikah the snake.
She did.
The ball python.
She saved all our animals.
Yeah, the cats, dogs.
2 cats, 2 dogs, and a ball python.
Wow. Now, how long have you had a ball python? I mean, they say people that have snakes as pets are kind of weird people. Do you want to address that?
We are weird. Why don't you take a guess how long a ball python would live?
50 years.
You're very close. Yeah, we've had this snake over 40 years.
Wow.
I got this snake as a lieutenant in one of my very first assignments. And it was a contractor who worked for me who had this snake, and he had built a little snake condo for it, and he asked if I wanted it. And so we bought it from him. And of course, the condo burned in the fire. So Nancy rescued the snake in a pillowcase and took it out. But we have a friend at church who built us a new condo for the snake. And it looks very much, I had pictures of it. So
Wow.
he built it pretty much according to that spec.
Now, you get like affection from a dog. Do you get any sort of emotional connection with a reptile?
In a word, no. No.
I wonder, do you think she at least recognizes that you will bring her mice? Is there a sense of...
She gets pretty excited when we put her in the feeder cage. She knows that that's where she eats mice.
Okay, how do you tell the snake is excited?
Oh, well, she can smell them, and
So she does some type of reaction that you can see?
she gets perky.
Does the tongue get a wiggling? And
It does, a forked tongue,
forked tongue. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, we will make sure that we have a few pictures of Sheikah the snake for our fantastic viewers. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode, and we will be back next week with Dr. John Rabins when
we'll do the last 3 defining truths.
We're going to do the last 3 defining truths, and we're going to talk about his career as an Air Force officer at different levels, and
an amazing bike trip.
Amazing bike trip, for which he also wrote a second book, and we'll put up some information on how people can order any of his books. And so we will see you next week on The Third Chair.
This has been The Third Chair. Next week, we will continue our conversation with John Rabins. Want to be a guest? Want to sponsor our show? Send us an email. Please subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. Next week, our guest will be Joe Ruggiero.